Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom, and thanks always to our engineer, Paul, for making me and my guests sound so good. Today's episode is sponsored by my home here, OC4 Venture Studio, and we are building the next generation tech startups here in Southern California. And so if you want to have a partner to help you really get your company going, get it growing quickly, and want to learn how to do it the right way, welcome to come check us out at oc4b.com. I am super excited to have Spencer Rascoff with me here today on Accelerate OC. And before we get to hear from Spencer and the many experiences that he's had, he's led some great companies. I want to also talk about what led him back to Southern California at this point in time, as I think he believes it's the next global innovation center of the world. Let me tell you a little bit about Spencer first. He has done a tremendous amount. He's co-founded two businesses that I would call household names, ZILLOW and Hotwire. And earlier this year, he also launched his latest company called DOT.LA. And it's DOT.LA, but I think people are already getting very comfortable with it. And it's a media company that's dedicated to covering and really connecting the LA startup world. And I would include Orange County in that as well. But really, SoCal focused is, I think, as he would probably describe it as well. He's also working on another startup that's in stealth mode. So I don't know that he's going to talk about it today. But I think, once you have that entrepreneur startup gene in you, it's hard to let it go, as we've heard from many prior guests. And I certainly resonate with as well. With regard to ZILLOW, he co-founded it with a guy named Rich Barton back in 2005, and he had several roles there, but most recently was the CEO for the last 10 years, including taking them public. And so we'll talk some about that experience today. He also did 15 acquisitions along the way, including a company here in Irvine. And so we'll talk about ZILLOW's presence here in Orange County as well. He co-wrote a best-selling book while he was there. He was constantly recognized as a company that people loved to work in, as they got a number of awards. And as I mentioned, he also co-founded Hotwire prior to that. And we all know that jingle. So maybe he'll talk about how that came to be. But he and the team sold Hotwire to Expedia back in about 2003, I believe. And then prior to that, he did what many do early in the career. He worked in investment banking and then even did a stint in private equity. So he has lived many lives. He came back to LA, where he grew up, fairly recently. I think he was gone for well over 20 years. I'm excited that he's back. And I think, we greatly benefit when people that have had the global experience that he's had bring their wealth of knowledge and experience into this ecosystem here. And, I think he has a scale with a company like ZILLOW that few around Southern California have experienced. And, as I say, when you get to a single letter on your public company ticker symbol, there aren't many. ZILLOW reached a $10 billion market cap. So we should stand up and pay attention when he speaks. So Spencer, it's really great to have you here on Accelerate OC today.
Thank you, Kerry. Thanks for having me. And I'm thrilled to be here talking with you about Southern California and innovation.
Awesome. Well, let's get to the starting line. The news of sort of now for you, you started .LA really just before this whole COVID-19 crisis hit. And I feel like we literally met face to face on one of the last days before quarantine and shelter in place.
Remember when you could shake hands and
exactly
and all that?
Yeah, it's a new world. So, as you think about, you're launching a digital media company, and we talked even about some events and things that you were planning. How has this impacted your initial plans?
It's interesting because so far we've been in a very fortunate position. So I started .LA about a year ago with a co-founder who joined as CEO, and I'm chair. We raised a $4 million seed round from the LA tech community, from angels and VCs and a couple of strategic companies in Southern California. And we launched about 3 months ago. So we launched in February 2020. And so far traffic has been booming because news, everybody is glued to the news, and there is a lot of news to cover in Southern California tech. We weren't meant to be earning any revenue yet. The business plan called for the first year and a half to just be focused on building audience and building out an editorial product and trying to become the most well-respected and well-read place that people get their news on Southern California tech. And so as a founder, I'm now sort of trying to decide, what do we do with respect to expenses, right? Because we're significantly ahead of plan, but we only have a 2 to 3 year runway. And so we've decided to continue growing and continue investing. We've added staff. We're up to, I think, about 12 employees now. And we've pivoted the event, what was going to be the business model, which was in-person events, bringing together people in and around Southern California tech, to web-based events. And we've become very good very quickly at producing web-based events and panels and discussions and speeches. But it's still an open question of whether we can build out a business model around that. But for now, we're focused on the strength of the editorial product. I'm very pleased with what we've been able to produce. We have a lot of newsletter subscribers. Traffic for April was up about, I think it was around 5x over March, awesome. Which was up 5x over February. So, we're off to a great start. But it's a challenging time for any startup. It's particularly a challenging time for a media startup when it's such a challenging industry to try to get to profitability.
Sure. Well, I mean, certainly to your point, like from a time to get a less distracted audience, this is probably as good a time as any.
Yes.
I think, you probably think a lot like I do. In the early stages of a business like this, you're going to end up doing a lot of experimentation around types of events and other things. And so you've probably just had to channel it a little bit differently. I'm curious, as things move forward, because I've seen this with some others that I've been talking to who have a heavy event strategy or structure, that they may move some events entirely digital permanently, or they will start to do some hybrid types of events. So any thoughts there on how you're thinking? I mean, you guys didn't even really have a baseline, right?
We didn't
done any in-person events to go, I wonder if that would be better. So,
well, it's funny. The woman that we hired to run events, is a very experienced person, has done this for a long time at several other organizations, and credit to her and credit to the nimble culture that we have at .LA, that the week that she started, we pulled the rug out from under her and said, guess what, no in-person events. And the team has scrambled and adjusted really quickly. I'll give you another quick example, and maybe this will inspire others listening who are at their startups to think about how they can be nimble in the face of this crisis. We had this mission at .LA. The reason we started the company was to try to bring together those in the tech community in Southern California. And so as long as we do things that are still on that mission, that's terrific. And so one of the things that we did was we took an idea that was on the back burner, sort of on the whiteboard, and we thought maybe someday we'll get to it, and we immediately pulled it to the front burner, which was building a Slack community for those in Southern California tech. And we're thrilled that you're in there. And so we scrambled and we pulled this product forward. We launched it. It's work from home.la. And it's an invite-only Slack community where people in Southern California tech can come and hang out and kibitz. And it's the online water cooler that we are all seeking as we're here in isolation in our homes. Again, credit to the team for pulling that off. And now, of course, we have to invest in growing that community and making sure that it's that those that spend time there have a good ROI on their time. But I'm proud of the team for having made these adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what if you look broader, SoCal, LA, what do you feel like? I mean, you've just come back. What have you felt like you've learned about LA through this so far?
Well, so I moved back to LA 4 years ago when I was still running ZILLOW, which was based in Seattle. And as you mentioned, I've been gone for almost 20 years. I hadn't lived in Southern California since high school. So I left when I was 18. I came back when I was 38, so 20, 20-ish years. And for 3 years, I commuted from LA back to Seattle every week to keep running ZILLOW. And about a year ago,
you're sort of living here, but you're not really living here. Right?
Yeah, my family was sort of living here. I was sort of living on an airplane. And about a year-ish ago, I retired as CEO of ZILLOW and finally started living here. But over those last 4 years, as I've gotten kind of reconnected with the Southern California business community, I was blown away by the amount of tech and innovation that was happening here. In fact, people think of Seattle as a tech hub, but I think by most measures that I can see, there's actually much more happening in tech, broadly defined, in Southern California than there is even in Seattle. And it's very diverse. There are, there's aerospace and robotics and consumer and media and ad tech and streaming and enterprise and HR tech and food tech. I mean, D2C, you name it. There are studios like OC4, and incubators and founders and early stage venture funds and late stage venture funds. There was really everything that you need to have a very robust tech ecosystem, except journalism. There was, I kept looking for things to read about what's happening in Southern California tech. And there are some small scale blogs or others that have sort of tried to shine a light on what's happening in LA tech, but I don't think anyone has done it really at scale. And so that's why we created .LA, was to try to do that, try to fill that hole. And I am incredibly bullish on Southern California. I think that in 2030, we're going to look back and say that the 20s were to Southern California as the 2000s were to the Bay Area, or the 2010s were to Seattle. And and actually, I think coronavirus might accelerate that. And the reason is, I think it's giving people, it's showing people that really they do not have to live in San Francisco or in the Bay Area in order to do their job. You can live anywhere, you can create companies anywhere, you can telecommute and do video conferencing. And in fact, you can raise money from investors from anywhere. And as an investor, you can live anywhere. And, if people are untethered from having to live in a certain place, like in San Francisco or in New York, advantage Southern California.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and I even look, post, I live down here in Orange County, where I moved from Santa Monica many years ago. And even relative to LA, where I am, we've had very, very low incidence rate of COVID-19, so much so that people are starting to even revolt a little bit and say, hey, come on, we've done our job. And so there, I think that just shows that, there are places where a lot of business is getting done, where people aren't on top of each other. And you can choose any kind of lifestyle you want. And if you think about Southern California, I'm a Midwesterner, and I feel like this is,
it's good living.
Gold. I hit gold coming out here 20 years ago.
It's good living. So I moved from New York to LA when I was 12, or my parents moved me from New York to LA when I was 12. And I went kicking and screaming, I don't want to leave New York. I love New York. I'm a New Yorker. And I got out here when I was 12 and, almost overnight, changed my tune. The beaches, the sun, the mountains, the lifestyle, the way of life is there's a lot to like.
That's right. So you talked about this next 10 years, which I totally agree with. Like I've felt it when I got here in 2002, it was pretty on the tech scene. And I'd been in some software companies prior to coming out here, and, .com crash hit. I didn't really feel like the .com crash hit LA all that badly, but it just felt really sleepy. And over the last really even 5 years, I ran a company based in Venice back in, I don't know if we've even talked about this, back in 2009. And there was nothing going on in Venice in 2009.
Right.
And now it's amazing. Right. And so, as you think about what is it in the next 10 years that you think is really going to emerge from here? Is it across all those different diverse categories, or do you think we're going to see some real centers of gravity?
There are a couple great trends in favor of Southern California. The biggest one I'd point to is that this is where the influencers live. Celebrities, athletes, social media influencers, like this is it. This is LA and Southern California more broadly defined is the part of the world that tells the rest of the world what's cool. And increasingly that's how brands are built. That's how direct to consumer brands are built. That's how, e-commerce brands are built. And so that really is a significant advantage to Southern California. The other big change relative to the Bay Area is you no longer need to hire 500 software engineers and have them go to a single office in order to build a product. I mean, for 30 years, it was like that. And the only place there was a density of software engineers was in the Bay Area. And so that's why it made sense. But now, between all this modularized software, the kind of no code, low code revolution, AWS, collaboration tools, video conferencing, et cetera, it means that you can start a company in Santa Monica, Venice, Irvine, Laguna, wherever, with a couple of engineers maybe, and then maybe you have a couple other contract engineers somewhere else, and then you've got maybe marketing in Southern California, and so it just allows for so much more to happen. And then the other very important trend is the intersection of media, entertainment, and pop culture, which is you can look at Disney Plus as sort of the prototypical example. So streaming is headquartered in Southern California. Yeah. YouTube, Quibi, Facebook, Snap, Instagram TV, Netflix, Disney Plus, Peacock, like all of these streaming services, the beating heart is Southern California. And as an example, yesterday at the .LA did a panel webinar about robotics. And one of the computer scientists, actually the technical lead for Roomba, the robotic vacuum, the guy that basically invented Roomba, was talking about all the hard tech involved in his startup, where he's created this robot that interfaces and interacts with autistic children to help with their social and emotional learning. He's talking about all the hard tech associated with his startup, and he says Southern California is the only place that my company could exist. Wow. And I mean, it doesn't get more hard tech than the robotics company. And he said it's because I have this employee who came from this Hollywood studio who's doing, the storytelling. I have this person who came from JPL. I have this person who came from SpaceX, and this person who came from, whatever, some other, Caltech or et cetera. And like the swirl of creativity in Southern California is what allows this robotics company to exist. So it's not just cannabis, and it's not just like, kind of lightweight fintech, stuff that Southern California can do. It's actually hard tech also.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's the fascinating thing is what I take sort of as the underlying description of what you're talking about is we've had such a diversity of economy here that now as you sort of flip it this way and you start saying, how do I take pieces from all of those elements and sort of, collide it in a new way with some creative stimulus that I think can come out of the community here. There's all kinds of really exciting new companies. I mean, one of the things I've been really trying to tackle down here in Orange County has been very siloed, almost industry silos. So you have, we're the center of the universe for surf brands and skate brands and sort of that lifestyle brand genre. And you go, how does that not infiltrate med device or the automotive sector or other industry segments that are here and could create really interesting breakthroughs? And we are moving, to your point, I think, away from this notion of, particularly in software, where that's hard. I think, when we see founders here and they start talking about they need to get this software written, we sort of go check the box. Like we know how to get that written.
Right.
Is there a real technical problem to solve here, or is it a business problem, user problem that needs to be well designed and well thought through? And those are the challenges. But it's, to your point, like the way or the problems in the business are new, but they're very different. I mean, it isn't. How do I go find a DevOps engineer or full stack or somebody to build a mobile app? I mean, it
will be interesting to see what happens with Snap and with Honey.
Yes.
Because the Honey sale was a huge exit. I think it was $4 billion. and that that will recycle a lot of wealth into the community, into angel investing, into other kind of mid-level people that from Honey that will go and do startups and will be very fun, very backable based on their pedigree. And it'll be interesting to see if Snap kind of turns over a generation. Also, I had a pitch yesterday from a founding team from Snap, for example.
Great.
And
those are super encouraging signs for guys
they
like
are.
us.
And it's interesting, having been in the Seattle tech scene for 15 years and done angel investing while I was at Zillow, I'll say that one thing that sort of held Seattle back from becoming the Bay Area, in spite of Microsoft and Amazon being headquartered there, was the fact that there wasn't much recycled capital.
And high retention probably too,
and
right?
very high retention. So
that's Orange County is really high retention, maybe even LA or broader, but that's absolutely been an Orange County.
Those big giants in Seattle, Amazon, Microsoft, Zillow, and Expedia, people didn't really leave. You think about how much ink has been written about the PayPal mafia, which was a relatively small-ish exit. It was about $1 billion exit 1 million years ago. And yet dozens of companies have been spawned from that. And it's because that capital and talent got recycled. So anyway, we'll sort of see what happens with Snap and Riot Games and Honey and others, and see if that kind of talent and money comes back into the community.
Well, that's what we need. If you think about some of the early, somebody like a Matt Coffin from Lower My Bills, right? I mean, there have been some, I've met some of the legacy folks there, but that's like early LA tech startups. And there've been, some of those, but to your point, I mean, we need this next generation, and we haven't seen that here. I mean, we were super close down here in Orange County with Palmer Luckey, with Oculus. And I mean, Palmer told me he thinks there've been 30 startups that have come from alumni of Oculus. The problem is they're all up north,
right? Because
the company got sucked up there. And, thankfully he's come back to Southern California and he's building another company here. And I think it's going to potentially spawn a whole bunch of people too, because
it's changing. It's changing. I ask every LA startup that pitches me or that .LA covers, if they think being in LA is holding them back in any way in terms of recruiting or fundraising. And resoundingly, the answer is quite the contrary. It's helping with recruiting. It's actually helping with fundraising because there's a lot of VC interest here, but there's perception valuations are lower here than the Valley. So they have plenty of interest. And again, I think especially with this kind of video conferencing revolution post coronavirus, I mean, there's just there's really no impediment to not being in San Francisco anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree. So as you've been thinking about the region, let's say, how are you thinking about it in your mind? Because I think some people are sort of calling it the, Santa Barbara to San Diego.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to end up with some distinctive clusters? Do you think it's going to be really intertwined?
I think that, the Santa Barbara to San Diego, actually Santa Barbara to Orange County is pretty similar size to the Bay Area. If you think about kind of Sausalito and Tiburon to the north and East Bay and all the way down to San Jose, that's a 2-hour drive kind of top to bottom, or, maybe an hour east to west. It's about the same as Santa Barbara down to Orange County. And so that's how I think about it. I mean, San Diego's a bit of a hike from up here, from LA. It's not as far from Orange County. There's a lot happening in San Diego, by the way. In fact,
they've done a great job.
Just the other day, I emailed my co-founder, the CEO of .LA, because I saw like the third or fourth financing, $50+ million funding round for San Diego company, mostly biotech. And I was like, gosh, maybe we need to make sure that we're covering as far south as San Diego. .LA's coverage universe really is from, we focus on Santa Barbara to Orange County. We very much include Orange County in our coverage. I'm sorry to those of you in Orange County about the brand name of .LA. I'm sure that
good domain.
Thank you. I'm sure that sort of irks you a little bit, but it is a catchy domain.
Well, I feel like weekly, especially lately, this conversation of, do we or not want to be part of the greater LA MSA comes up. And Orange County, on one hand, I think gets a lot of benefit from being part of LA. And I mean, you've seen it obviously with groups like the Anaheim Angels changing their name to try to encompass this. And I think a lot of people look at Disneyland as being in Southern California or LA and not really getting that specific. And we've got 34 cities here. So it's hard to create a cohesive brand. And it's something I think we need it, but we also need to be part of this greater region. And so I think that's what a lot of us here are trying to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super long LA, but I'm really, really long Orange County. I think that Orange County will successfully draft behind LA's ascent as a real tech capital, and then it will end up being the sort of like even better lifestyle version, almost like I don't know what the Bay Area sort of equivalent is. It's like, I mean, Palo Alto is pretty idyllic, in the same way that Orange County is pretty idyllic. I mean, I for those 3 years that I was commuting from LA to keep running Zillow, I worked from Zillow's Irvine office a couple of days a week. So, I mean, I commuted probably 2 days from LA up to Seattle, and probably 2 or 3 days from, I drove from LA down to Irvine. Spent a lot of time in Irvine. It's gorgeous. I mean, Orange County is beautiful. It's perfect.
Very
it's
comfortable. Yes.
The sun always shines. There's like bluebirds everywhere and rainbows and unicorns and no traffic. And it's just like amazing. And, I think, the schools are good. It's just it's a great lifestyle. And, so my recommendation, I guess, to those of you in the Orange County community is to draft behind LA. Like, in other words, to position yourself as part of the Southern California tech community. Yeah. And then those that are in the know, you're like, oh, and by the way, why would you want to live in Venice where it's so gritty when you could live in, Laguna, and why don't you do your next startup in Laguna or wherever, Irvine, not in Santa Monica or West Hollywood. But that the rising tide of LA will definitely lift the Orange County boat. Yeah,
I agree. And there's a lot of cross-pollination happening. I mean, there are people driving from LA down here. There's a ton of people from here driving into LA. And I've speculated for a long time since I got here that I think, whether it was Snap that would do it or could do it, or somebody behind them, that we'll see, I'll call it a multi-node company with significant presence in multiple Southern California submarkets, because it just makes sense, right? Like, to get, like you were doing, you could have an LA headquarters, you could have an Orange County office, you could have even Pasadena to the west side is difficult. My last startup, we opened an engineering office. We were in Marina del Rey. We opened an engineering office in Pasadena, and people loved it because maybe they'd come in 1 or 2 days a week, but
and the Seattle companies do that also. So Microsoft has offices in Seattle and Redmond and in Bellevue. Amazon has offices on kind of both sides of Lake Washington for commuting purposes. And you're kind of loosely assigned to one, but you can use either. And I agree with you. I definitely think that will happen. We certainly looked at it a lot at Zillow when we as you mentioned in the intro, we bought a small Irvine startup. Which had probably about 10 employees when we acquired it. And then when we decided to open a second office outside Seattle, we chose to use Irvine as the second office. And at first it was a software company that we bought with about 10 employees, mostly engineers. But when we expanded that office, it was mostly sales. And we opened it as our second sales office. And we benefited from a great sales culture, a lot of people in the mortgage industry, and we were selling ads to real estate agents, and it's a pretty similar sale. So we grew really quickly there, a couple hundred employees in Irvine, and then we kept running into engineers that we wanted to hire but didn't want to move to Seattle. They wanted to live in LA or live in Orange County, and so we slowly and almost reluctantly started growing the engineering office in Irvine. From the original 10 employees at the company we acquired to, by the time I left about a year ago, I would guess there are over 100 engineers.
Yeah, and I've heard just even here that there's a great engineering group there.
There is, and
it's very well regarded.
They're really well regarded. They're as strong technically as the best people in Seattle or in our San Francisco office, and they're less drama. They are, and all due respect to any of my, Seattle friends listening, but I'll say that, the Irvine employees were fantastic. They really were, engineering and sales. And they're loyal, they're committed, and they were just great employees. And I loved that office. It's got a great energy and great vibe. And so Zillow now has probably, I don't know, 300 or 400 people in the Irvine office. House has a couple hundred people there. Facebook has a big office there. I think Google also.
Yeah, Google's got almost, I think it's over 700 people. We've got, Amazon has several thousand people.
Oh yeah, Amazon has a big office.
Yeah. And a lot of them have come here in the same way Zillow did, where they made an early acquisition and then sort of had a realization of, wow, there's some talent here in either a certain function like sales, or they've ended up doing it in a multidisciplinary type of way. So I think we've done fairly well as a satellite. The challenge that I've seen, and I've tried to figure out how to crack this, I'd love your thoughts on it, is how do we get those companies that aren't based here to still participate in the local community? Because they're really, they're trying to set up this culture of we're Seattle centric, we're Bay Area centric, whatever it is. Yeah. What I feel like we as a community need to do to say, hey, you're here, we want you to participate. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, because they look at that and they go, well, you're going to try and poach our people, or
yeah, I mean, it comes from the culture at the office leadership. I mean, in Justin LaJoy, who was the CEO of the company that we acquired, who he ran the Irvine office for many years. He recently retired from Zillow also, and is working on some other startup ideas and doing some angel investing. He's an investor in .LA actually. Justin was very engaged in the community, and we were involved in United Way. We had frequently had local political speakers come in. We did a lot of volunteering from the Irvine office. So I think if you get the right,
leadership,
you get the right leadership that cares about community building, it goes a long way.
Yeah. So and I think that's what we need to, welcome them, and then also even encourage that to the extent we can. That's great. So let's go back and talk just briefly about .LA. One of the things, I'm super excited that you're doing this, because one of the things that and part of why I even started Accelerate OC was to try to highlight stories. I've had so many people say to me over the years here, there's just not interesting things happening here, or where's the excitement? And I think probably like you're realizing with .LA, the number of stories is incredible.
Yeah,
the number of people doing great things is not in short supply. It's just about how to tell the stories, giving them platforms to do it. One of the things that, sort of like the benefit of the Seattle companies retaining people was if those stories aren't out there, then, people resort to just kind of keeping doing what they're doing. So any thoughts you have on, how do we inspire more people? I mean, some of them are going to get forced out right now, I guess, by some of the job losses in the short term that are occurring, and they may choose to go start a company. But like, how do we create a more exciting?
Well, I think we have to. I think all of us in the community have a megaphone in our own way. I mean, for a long time, it was Mark Suster up front, kind of being, the one-man marching band, blogging and tweeting along LA, and it was kind of like, just kind of one guy in the, in the audience clapping. And now, I mean, you have a megaphone, I have a megaphone, so many others do too. I'm on .LA right now looking at some of the top stories. I mean, we've got stories on SpaceX, on Bird, on Relativity Space, which is 3D printing rockets to send things to Mars. Companies doing interesting things around COVID vaccines, a lot of robotics. I mean, Quibi, I mean, a lot of news about Quibi. There's no shortage of news to cover. In fact, we're drowning in stories. We have probably 10-ish reporters, and we probably have story ideas every day for 40 people to cover. So we have way more story ideas than we have capacity. So we just all as a community have to shine a light on what's happening, and then it'll build momentum and become self-fulfilling.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I feel it. Like I said earlier, the last 5 years, it just keeps building, and I think that's the That's really the encouraging thing. Do you feel like the schools here are doing a good job of equipping the culture and the students to really see going and doing a startup or being an entrepreneur as a really viable path? I
think they're getting there. I mean, the UW in Seattle had a very tight partnership with the leading Seattle tech companies. I think the Southern California schools produce, there are more engineers that graduate every year and get masters and PhDs every year in Southern California than any county or two counties in the country. So we have no shortage of people, but I do think we could have tighter integration between the businesses and the academic community.
Yeah. So, any other personal goals that you have? I mean, you've done so much beyond .LA. Any other things? And you're working on a stealth startup. Like anything else that you're really?
I'm doing a lot of angel investing, and I'm working. I'm working on 2 startups. I'm trying to start a couple of companies and be co-founder and chair of several of them, but ideally leave the CEO position to somebody else that wants to dedicate 120% of her or his time to that single business. I want to stay a little bit broad and work on multiple things.
Sure. That's a luxury spot to be in at this point. So I know Paul's giving us the time sign here. So, we will have to do this again for sure. Final lap. One of the things I always like to end with is just that, key lesson you've learned along the way or piece of advice. So if you think about, this growing group of SoCal entrepreneurs that are around here, any advice or lessons that you want to just make sure you can impart to them?
I mean, the most important thing in my career has been surrounding myself with great people who work better as a team than as individuals. That's actually one of the hardest things in the stage that I'm at in my career right now, where I'm starting new companies, is finding those collaborators. And so I will say that I've found the Southern California tech community to be incredibly welcoming, and so that's great. So the advice I'd give to people is, in spite of all the technology out there, and in spite of the social distancing reality that we're in the midst of, there's really no substitute for building relationships with people, and a lot of great things come for you and for your companies from that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you. So Spencer, thank you so much for joining me today. And I mean, what an amazing ride you've been on and career that you've had thus far. And thanks for sharing the stories and the wisdom and perspective. I know my audience will greatly appreciate it. I'm super excited for what's ahead with .LA. Anything we can do from down here in Orange County, know that I'm here and we're here to help as a community. And, I think, even though you're in LA, you're doing your part to accelerate Orange County as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at accelerateoc.com, or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's accelerate OC together.